Hi, my name is Jamie Marich. My pronouns are she, they, and I am a person in long-term recovery from an addictive disorder, a dissociative disorder. I guess I'm in recovery from this thing called life, and I'm happy to be here talking to you today. I was raised by two parents who were already in a pretty high conflict marriage by the time I was born. That might not be fair to say because a few years into my life, my father converted to a pretty extreme evangelical religious group. And at that point is when I started experiencing a lot of tension in my home because my mom stayed kind of firm in her Catholic religion. My dad, went to this really what I have come to learn as an extreme form of evangelicalism that perpetuated a lot of what we call spiritual abuse on us. And spiritual abuse, which is also something I teach on, is this idea of God being used as the weapon.
So I really appreciated the way that you described that the spiritual abuse that you had experienced, and so many recovery programs are spiritually based. So when you decided, I want to do something different and whatnot, how did you deal with that? What'd you do?
Well, what was interesting was I went from the evangelical side, which I felt was very abusive and toxic, and I tried my Catholic roots again too, because my mom was still is a practicing Catholic. My brother's a priest, so there's still a long Catholic, stride in our family. So I started going to a Catholic church initially, because at that point the answer for me was still very much church. And I worked for a Catholic church over in Europe, and initially by going back to church I stopped using drugs, but I was still drinking. Yet I also operated from the perspective that drugs were the problem, not drinking, and then I ended up still drinking through that, and then I used drugs 8 months later. We know how that works. Like, you replace it and then it all happens. And so I was fortunate that Janet was somebody who identified as Catholic, because I was able to kind of listen to her, because I really felt from my upbringing church was still somehow the answer. But she also introduced to me the program of Alcoholics Anonymous, and I want to be very clear, I know AA 12 steps are not for everyone. They are rife with problems, and I've been a big critic and commentator on the 12 steps in a lot of my professional work, but nothing will change the fact that they were the bridge I needed kind of between religion, because a religious person introduced me to the 12 steps, and finding a God of my understanding who loved me. It was in a 12-step meeting about 8 months into my recovery that I was just filled with this aha moment that this is a God who loves me. And the God I was raised with has nothing to do with this God that's helping to heal me. Now, even though I think a lot of facets of recovery can be toxic with pushing spirituality on people and religion on people, and I could grind that axe in another interview, for me, again, it was so much of Janet's approach. And even in a lot of the professional work I do in recovery, people say, well, what's your motivation for it? I want everybody to have an experience like I had with Janet. Because she was tough on me when she needed to be. She challenged me, but it was only after she first validated and honored the struggles that I went through. And I'm here today because of her. And I am grateful that she played such a dynamic part in help leading me to this God and this manifestation of spirituality that's really about love. So this is both what Janet did with me, and it's a lot of what I teach professionally. That part of being trauma-informed and keeping people from being re-traumatized is allowing for a degree of flexibility, especially in language. Because even though I am grateful for what AA and the 12 steps have given us, I appreciate it was founded by two white men in the 1930s who were highly educated, and their language and their lexicon and kind of where they were both coming from religiously and spiritually led to words like character defects, which I know is a trip up for a lot of people in the 6th step. And so like even Workaholics Anonymous, in their text, will say if that phrase is a sticking point for you, because it is for a lot of survivors of trauma who carry a belief that I'm defective, change it to something like negative coping skill. Even when I pray the 7-step prayer today, it's please heal all the parts and aspects of myself that are no longer of service to others. And I think we've learned so much since the 30s that can help us like change up the language where you're still getting at the same essence. But language is important. It's very important. We teach that professionally in trauma-informed care, and I was grateful that in my personal recovery I had someone who understood that. One of the first potential trigger points for people is the whole "I'm powerless" over alcohol. And I actually had a aha moment with this from just a random woman I met in meetings in my first year. And I was really struggling with that word and being powerless my whole life, and I was getting in my head with it. And she said, all the step is saying is you're powerless over the alcohol.
How did you personally learn to deal with the trial and tribulations of what life is without, picking up again, without falling into some of the other isms? What do you do?
My first gut level answer to this is very sad, but it's keeping an open eye to so many people in my life, my friends, my family, people I meet through my work, who are still struggling. And I thank them for letting me in on their struggle, because it really shows to me this is not going to get easier if you pick up again. As appealing as it can still sound on some days, we really are teachers to each other. And so keeping that openness to experience has been a help. And I think what that's ultimately helped me to do is not forget what it was like. So that's been important. But I also think, and this was another bit of wisdom I got from Janet that she had gotten from one of her clients, is that if a flower stops growing, the only direction it has to go is to wilt. And so I never have tried to approach recovery with an attitude of I've arrived, I got this. That there's always something to be addressing in my growth, because life keeps revealing things, and life, especially going through what we as a collective have gone through in the pandemic and everything that has brought to light, life continues to be, if not a traumatizing, at very least a stressful experience. I remember a very devastating experience I had from a woman who's no longer with us. She was my sober mother. She was like a recovery mother to me, even though she never formally sponsored me. And again, this, what I'm about to share with you, was kind of one blemish in our relationship, because it was overall a beautiful relationship. But we were driving once to a meeting, and she's like, I just don't get bisexuality. And I wasn't really out to her at that point. She's like, I get wanting to sleep with men if you're a man, or wanting to sleep with women if you're a woman. But she goes, I just don't get this whole, it just feels stingy to me, or unstable, or like you can't make up your mind. And I remember sitting in the car very much in a frozen state, like, okay, I haven't come out to her, and now I don't really feel safe to, because of a lot of that. And bi folks especially get all the stereotypes about, pick a side, it's a phase, you're naturally going to cheat because you want it all. You're unstable because you can't make up your mind, which is what she got into. And so after I kind of breathed through my initial freeze, I was able to talk with her very calmly, and I came out to her at that point because I knew she was fundamentally a safe person who was maybe just living with outdated information. So I think that's important. Now, what's fascinating is I did not sponsor in 12 Steps for a long time, because I felt it was, because I work professionally as a counselor and a writer and a teacher, it just felt like I didn't have the headspace for it to sponsor for a lot of years. And then several bisexual women started to ask me to sponsor them in the program, in where I was living. And everything in my heart was like, do it, especially when they said, people just don't get it. Because what that woman said to me is something that they heard even worse in meetings from people who weren't naturally as safe. So any person I have sponsored recently is somewhere on this rainbow spectrum, as I like to say it, or one person is at very least a very strong ally and has felt misunderstood and unpacked. So I just consider that a big act of service, to be there for other especially bisexual women who feel misunderstood by people in mainline recovery. I am so fortunate, and I believe he's also being interviewed in your series. My sponsor is a man named Daryl Shinton. He has been my sponsor for the last 6 years. And he is a queer man who is nearing 80. And I remember several years ago when I met him through the LGBT meeting here in Warren, he and his husband Mike were just immediately people who they wanted what I had. Because I was sponsorless for a couple years because I was having a hard time really finding somebody after having left my long-term sponsor who really kind of got me. Mm-hmm. And not just the sexuality piece, but some of the other things I believe in too. And I met Daryl at a meeting, and he and Mike have been out in Ohio for like 50 years.
Wow.
And it's like people who can be that authentic and that comfortable with themselves and then have sobriety on top of it, I want what they have. And so it's the best sponsorship I've ever had, to be sponsored by a gay male whom I can talk to about anything. Because even though I had good sponsorship prior to that, I still feel there was an element of me needing to censor myself, especially about the sexuality. Or about some of my spiritual beliefs, which can get a little mystical and funky for the AA Christian mainstream, right? And Daryl's just somebody who, all right. And I was going through my second very shameful divorce, and Daryl and Mike took me to court that day and took me out for sushi afterwards. And as I was beating myself up, they're like, stop it. Can you be gentle with yourself in this situation? So that for me has made such a difference as I've grown more confident as a queer person in recovery.
So the relationships that you have in your life today, with your sponsors is fantastic. You've talked a little bit about your with your family of origin, so your mom, your brother, and your dad. How did you rebuild some of those relationships and become comfortable with those relationships?
Yeah. My father and I still aren't super close because he fundamentally doesn't agree with who I am as a person, but I don't really agree with I don't agree with a lot of what he teaches and believes either. So it's one of those detach with love situations, which recovery has also taught me, but I can still be civil to him and love him as I would love any other human being, walking down the street, and still find a gratitude for some of the good things I got from him. My mom and brother and I are in a cool place. They've come to, I don't know if they fully understand who I am, but they love and respect who I am, and we have a good time together. And as I said, my brother's a priest, and he's a pretty conservative priest, but I had such a special moment several years ago when he was doing a summer mission, working at a parish that had a strong outreach to one of the addiction centers in town. And I remember him calling me saying, like, I'm out of my league with this. I need to talk to you about it. Mm-hmm. And we spoke about this thing called the ministry of presence, which a lot of pastoral figures will talk about. And I think it's something that is a big part of recovery, whether it's in a professional treatment setting, whether it's in 12-step, whether it's in other kind of mutual support. And that's the art of being there for somebody without trying to change them. And when I think of my relationship with my brother, that's it. It's that ministry of presence. And again, we don't see eye to eye on a lot of stuff, but we love each other very deeply. And he, I was just thinking about this when he got ordained, how he was only 14 when I really started realizing I had to get out of this area to get help, and when I had hit my first significant bottom, and he was the only person in my family I could really talk to about it, and he completely supported me in leaving the area and moving to work in Europe, which is ultimately where I met Janet. And he very much had this attitude of do what you have to do. And I will often say he had a front row seat to my bottoms with mental health and addiction, and has been one of my greatest supporters.
That's beautiful. What are the intangible and tangible gifts that you have received over the past 19 years in recovery?
Tangible, I mean, I have work and a business that some days I want to throw out the window, but I ultimately enjoy. I ended up going back to get a master's in counseling at Janet's suggestion. Remember, she wrote in the first 24-hour book she gave to me, God doesn't choose the qualified, he qualifies the chosen. I'm like, Janet, I don't even like psychology. What do you mean go back and get a master's in counseling? She said, trust me, you'll be good at it. And so, I had the privilege to work in direct care in the field for a lot of years. I still have a small practice, although I've transitioned mostly to teaching other therapists and doing writing and advocacy work. And yeah, it's an unbelievable life when I sit back and really think of it in terms of tangible. But intangible, wow. An amazing family of choice today that I've gotten through recovery. A lot of them are here at this festival where we're at today. And really just this sense of connection to that higher power that loves me that I talked about. I'm not going to lie, I've had a very stressful year. And so even as I ask the question, it's like, oh, am I in the best headspace to be answering this right now? Have I dealt with these stresses as gracefully as possible? And it's like, yeah, you're doing fine. I'm just thinking of the lessons I got from Daryl and Janet and people who've shepherded me in this over the years. Just think of how much capacity you have now to ride these hard waves, and know that taking the drug, taking the drink, engaging in any other behaviors that are going to cut you off from yourself is just going to make it worse.
For somebody who is out there who's really struggling either to get sober or in those early days of recovery, what are some words of wisdom, some messages of hope, those types of things that really speak true to you or have over the years?
I'm going to say the exact thing Janet said to me. After everything you've been through in your life, it's no wonder you're in this situation now. It's survival. You did what you needed to do to survive. What are you going to do about it now? Now that you know, and you know that so much of this was just about survival, what are you going to do about it now? And those words changed my life because she validated me, and then she went on to challenge me. Because obviously I needed the validation to even be willing to go there, to change. Had she just been, iron nails coming in, I don't think I would have listened. But that validation is what I would tell anybody. After everything you've been through in your life, I don't blame you for being where you're at now. Yet now that you know, some action's going to be required. And when I look at a lot of my recovery journey, it still requires a lot of learning how to grow up, getting my head out of my behind, so to speak. That I'm not going to sugarcoat it and be like, recovery is all about mastering your spirituality or doing all this deep trauma work. That yes, that can be a very big, important part of it, but you may have to learn how to boil water and make your bed and do the next right thing and get yourself clean in the morning and physically clean in the morning. And those little steps can accumulate into helping you develop this lifestyle change you need for recovery.